Hello, I am Mike.
Hello, I am Lily. Welcome to English Podcast Flow.
I'm 57. If you're 20 or 30, watch this.
Yeah.
You get the feeling that we're about to dive into some seriously valuable wisdom, hard-earned wisdom. And that's what we're going to do today in this podcast. We're going
Yeah.
to really explore these life lessons, these pieces of advice, and try to get to the heart of what they mean. Why are they so powerful? And how can they really help you, the listener, especially if you're in your 20s or 30s, which is such a time of huge change and
Mhm.
possibility, in life.
I think what's really interesting about this is, the whole idea of learning from someone who's been there and done that. It's kind of like having a seasoned guide, before you set off on a journey into unfamiliar territory. It's like they're sharing their map with you after they've already explored the terrain. And these notes, they really touch on so many different aspects of life, everything from how we think about time to the crucial importance of planning for our financial future and even, how much our relationships can shape who we become. It's really about, if you think about it, like building a strong foundation for a fulfilling and successful life, And these points, they're like the essential building blocks of that foundation.
What's interesting is that shift in perspective that often happens as you get older. You start to see time not as something that's infinite, but as something that's precious and limited. If you think about it, it's like the principle of compound interest in finance. The earlier you start investing your money, the more it can grow over time, because the interest you earn is earning more interest. It just keeps building on itself. And that same principle of starting early and getting those big long term results, it applies to so many areas of life.
Yeah.
If you start learning a new language or playing a musical instrument in your 20s, you've got years and years to develop those skills. You know, you could potentially reach a level of mastery that it would be much harder to achieve if you started later in life. So this brings up a big question. Are there things in your life right now that you're putting off because you think you have plenty of time to get to them later? Maybe you wanted to write a book or start a business or learn to paint or something. Whatever it is. Just think about this timeline you've got in your head for those things, and ask yourself, could I benefit from starting sooner rather than later? Even if it's just taking a small step in that direction right now.
That's such a great analogy, comparing time invested in skills and health to compound interest. It really makes you realize that it's not just about, potential financial gains. It's about this cumulative effect, of consistent effort over a long period of time in all these different areas of your life. And that leads us right into this next piece of advice, which is very direct. Save money early, learn new skills, and take care of your health now. It's like this three-part strategy for building a better future. And it's easy to understand why it's so important. But, when you're in your 20s or 30s, the immediate gratification of spending money can feel a lot more appealing than, saving for some distant future. And the whole idea of prioritizing your health can feel like something you can worry about later. But these notes, they're really hammering home the point that, there are massive long-term benefits to taking these steps early on in life.
Yeah, and what I find really interesting here is how these three things are all interconnected, Saving money early isn't just about having a bigger pile of cash later on. It also gives you this sense of security and opens up possibilities. It could allow you to pursue those new skills you're learning or to deal with unexpected health issues without having to worry so much about the financial strain. And then on the other hand, taking care of your health early on
Yeah.
by eating healthy, exercising regularly, getting enough sleep, it gives you the energy you need, both physically and mentally to learn those new skills and to go after your financial goals with more energy and focus. It's like you're building a solid foundation for a really tall building.
Mm.
Each of these elements, your finances, your skills, your health, they're like the supporting pillars. And if you neglect any one of them, it weakens the whole structure. It makes it less stable and less able to support your growth in the long run. So think about this. How balanced are your investments across these three areas right now? Are you putting more emphasis on one than the others? Maybe you're really focused on your career, but you're not taking care of your health. Or maybe you're saving money, but you're not investing in learning new skills. It's worth thinking about that balance.
I love that image of the three pillars, supporting your future. And the last point they make about time is so simple but so powerful. If you use time wisely, your future will be much better. It really gets to the heart of it. It's not about being busy all the time or trying to squeeze every last drop out of every minute. It's about being intentional about how you spend your time and energy, making choices that will pay off in the long run. Okay, let's move on to the next piece of advice, which is all about our financial lives. Save and invest early. And this seems to build directly on that idea of time being our most valuable asset, right?
Definitely. It appears that these insights are laid out in a very logical way. You start with the importance of time, and then you move into how we can use that time to build financial security. The statement that many young people spend everything they earn, I mean, that's just a reality for a lot of people today, right? There's this temptation to spend everything you make, especially with all the social pressures and the easy access to credit that we have. But then they contrast that with this idea that if you save and invest early, your money will grow. And this is where the power of compounding really comes in. What's so fascinating is that when you're young, the amounts you're able to save and invest might seem really small, like they don't even make a difference. But over the long period that early saving allows for that compounding effect can be absolutely huge. It can lead to some serious financial growth down the road.
And they give this great example. Even small amounts like $50 per month can become a lot in 30 years. Now, $50 might not feel like a big sacrifice to a lot of people. But when you think about it, that money adding up month after month, year after year, and then you factor in potential investment returns on top of that, it really shows you the power of time and compounding. It's almost like financial magic. But as you said earlier, it's really just math at work. The earlier you start, the more time your money has to grow and multiply.
Exactly. It's not just sitting there doing nothing. If it's invested wisely, it can generate returns over time. And then those returns start generating their own returns. That's the snowball effect, that makes early investing so powerful. If you think about it, that the difference between someone who starts saving at 25 and someone who starts at 45, it's massive.
Yeah.
That person who starts at 25, they have 20 extra years for their money to grow, even if they're putting in the same amount every month. So have you thought about setting up a regular savings and investment plan for yourself? Even if it's just a small amount to start with, the important thing is to be consistent and to start early.
Like planting a seed, the sooner you plant it, the more time it has to grow. And the advice here is pretty clear. Start now and let your money work for you. It's about shifting your mindset from, just working to earn money in the present to also letting your past efforts and your savings contribute to your future financial well-being. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is something that's just as important as financial health, and that's our physical and mental health. Your health is your wealth. I mean, that's such a fundamental truth, because if you don't have a reasonable level of good health, it's so much harder to enjoy the fruits of your labor, to pursue your goals and aspirations. It can even make it impossible in some cases.
It appears that this section is really emphasizing something that we often overlook, especially when we're younger. And that's that our health isn't just a nice to have. It's absolutely essential for living a fulfilling and successful life. The statement that many young people do not think about their health, I mean, that's unfortunately true a lot of the time, right? When you're young, your body is pretty resilient. And the long-term consequences of unhealthy habits, they just seem so far off. But the next point, that good health is important for a happy and successful life, it just drives home that connection, between our well-being and our ability to actually go after the things we want in life. And it's important to remember that good health isn't just about the absence of disease. It's about having that vitality, that sharpness of mind, that emotional resilience. It all contributes to our quality of life and our ability to really engage with the world around us.
And the advice they give is very practical. Eat well, exercise regularly, and sleep enough. I mean, those things sound simple enough. But actually putting them into practice consistently, with all the demands of a busy life, it can be a challenge for a lot of people. But for most of us, it's not about, going on some crazy restrictive diet or working out like a professional athlete. It's more about finding that balance, those healthy habits that you can actually stick with over the long term.
Right. It's about building a lifestyle that supports your health, both physically and mentally. If you think about it, poor health can have such a negative impact on your productivity, your career, your relationships, chronic illness, constant fatigue, poor mental health. It can all hold you back from performing at your best in every area of your life. So taking care of your health when you're younger, it's not just about feeling good in the present. It's about investing in your future ability to achieve your goals, to maintain strong relationships, and to really live a vibrant and fulfilling life. So ask yourself, are you making your health a priority right now? Or is it something that tends to get pushed aside, because of other demands? Even small changes you make today can have a big impact on your health down the road.
And this last point in this section really ties it all together. A healthy body gives you energy to reach your goals. It's really that straightforward. If you're feeling tired and run down all the time, if you're not taking care of yourself, it's so much harder to find the energy and motivation to learn new things, to build your career, to pursue your passions. So good health is
is the fuel that drives you forward.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about education and career paths. Skills matter more than degrees. And this is a really interesting perspective, especially in a society. It puts so much emphasis on formal education, you know.
It appears that this section is challenging that traditional view of success being tied to degrees and diplomas. You know, the statement that many people believe a degree will guarantee success. That was definitely the prevailing belief for a long time. But the argument here is that in today's world, skills are more important. And this reflects a real shift in what employers are looking for now. You know, there's this growing emphasis on practical skills and being able to actually do things, you know, not just having knowledge, but being able to apply it in real world situations. And while a degree can give you a good foundation and open some doors, it's often those specific skills that you have that will determine how successful you are in your career.
And you give some really good examples of these valuable skills. Learn useful skills like communication, sales, and technology. These are skills that are in demand across so many different industries and jobs. You know, being able to communicate effectively, whether it's speaking, writing, presenting, it's crucial in almost every job. And then sales skills. You know, when you think about it, it's really about understanding people's needs and finding solutions for them. And that's valuable in so many different contexts. And of course, technology, it's becoming more and more essential in every aspect of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so having some level of technological proficiency, it's almost a basic requirement these days.
And these aren't necessarily skills that you learn in a traditional classroom setting, you know, like communication skills. Those are developed through practice, through real world interactions, through putting in the effort to be clear and empathetic in your communication. And sales skills. Those are often honed through experience, through learning how to build relationships and understand people's motivations. And technology, you know, that's a field that's constantly changing. So you have to be willing to keep learning to adapt, to pick up new skills as you go. And you can do that through online courses, workshops, self-study. You know, there are so many different avenues for learning these days. The job market is changing so rapidly. You know, there are jobs today that didn't even exist 10 years ago. And the skills you need to succeed in those jobs, they often go beyond what you learn in a traditional degree program. So think about this question. Beyond your formal education, what are the practical skills that you're working on right now or that you want to learn, you know? Those skills might turn out to be your most valuable assets in the long run.
And this last line in this section is really empowering. The more skills you have, the more opportunities you get. It makes sense, right? The more you know how to do, the more versatile you are, the more adaptable you are to different challenges and different roles. And that opens up more possibilities for, you know, for career advancement, for personal growth. So it really emphasizes the importance of lifelong learning. You know, never stop expanding your skill set.
Okay, let's go back to financial well-being for a minute, but this time let's talk about avoiding some potential pitfalls. Avoid debt and live simply. And this is such relevant advice, you know, in a world where credit is so easy to get and there's this constant pressure to buy more stuff.
This section really highlights a big challenge that a lot of young people face, and that's debt. You know, the observation that many young people take big loans for cars, clothes, and fun. I mean, that's a pretty common pattern these days, right? It's so easy to get caught up in instant gratification. And with credit so readily available, it's easy to rack up a lot of debt, especially for things that aren't really essential. But then comes this warning. Debt can trap you for many years, and it's a stark reminder of how dangerous debt can be. Especially when it's for things that you don't really need or for things that lose their value quickly. Debt can really limit your options in the future. You know, it can delay your ability to save for important things like a down payment on a house or starting a business, and it can be a constant source of stress and anxiety. It can really weigh you down.
So the advice that follows is simple, but so important. Live simply, spend wisely, and avoid debt when possible. It's about being mindful of your spending habits, you know, learning to differentiate between what you truly need and what you just want, and then prioritizing your long-term financial security over the short-term satisfaction of buying stuff that might not even make you happy in the long run. You know, it's also about really understanding what it means to borrow money, understanding interest rates, repayment terms, the long-term impact that debt can have.
Right. Living simply doesn't mean you have to live a life of deprivation, you know? It's more about being intentional with your resources and focusing on the things that truly matter to you, the things that bring you lasting joy and fulfillment. And avoiding those unnecessary expenses that are often driven by, you know, social pressure or impulsive desires, or just keeping up with the Joneses, you know? Think about the freedom that comes with being debt-free, or having only a manageable level of debt. It gives you so much more control over your life and your choices. You know, it opens up possibilities that might not be there if you're weighed down by debt. So ask yourself, how mindful are you of your spending habits? You know, are there areas where you could cut back on spending, or where you could avoid taking on more debt? It's never too early to start developing good financial habits, you know?
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found these life lessons to be helpful and thought-provoking.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and never stop growing.
Take care.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more English learners like you. By subscribing, you'll never miss a new episode, and by liking the video, you're letting us know you want more helpful content. Thank you for your support. It means so much to us.